Support for the Leadoff on WGLT and WGLT.org comes from the Central Illinois Regional Airport, where family trips to Florida can begin and end close to home. Nonstop service on Allegiant Airlines to Tampa St. Pete and Orlando Sanford from Bloomington. Close, convenient, Sierra. More at CIRA.com.
Central Illinois scouting leaders are disappointed their partnership with the military could be coming to an end. That's one of the things you need to know to start your day for Monday, December 8th. I'm Ryan Denham, and this is WGLT's The Leadoff. Now let's lead off with how scouts in Central Illinois are trying to prevent the end of a century-long partnership between the organization and the U.S. military. WGLT's Eric Stock reports.
Ben Blumenberg is CEO of the WD Boys Council, which oversees about 4,000 scouts across central Illinois. He says he was disappointed by a report that the Pentagon wants to sever ties with the scouts. As for the claim the scouts are no longer a meritocracy and attacks boy-friendly spaces,
I think I was confused by that claim.
Blumenberg notes girls had participated in some co-ed scout programs for decades. He says the makeup hasn't changed much since girls fully integrated in 2019.
The girls had a little more giggling and a little less belching than the campsite when I was 15. But the day-to-day is still about scouts learning how to become leaders.
Blumenberg says boys and kids in general are struggling with mental health and obesity and are too attached to electronics. He says scouts offer a healthy alternative. Blumenberg says scouts are reaching out to federal lawmakers to urge them to fight any plans to cut ties with the military. It's part of their regular civic engagement.
While scouting has never been fully about preparing kids for the military, we prepare kids for success in all aspects of life. And I think the military would be foolish not to want scouts as their recruits.
Still, if the Pentagon does break up with the scouts, Blumenberg says he thinks the scouts will survive. For the Leadoff, I'm Eric Stock.
Here's some other stories we're following in the WGLT newsroom. The State Board of Education is working on a plan to improve math skills among K-12 students. Capital News Illinois reports that agency is developing what it calls a comprehensive numeracy plan, which change the way math is taught and how math teachers are trained. The city of Bloomington plans to resume regular bulk waste pickup. This follows complaints that the city's bulk waste drop-off site was being exploited, mostly by landlords and contractors. In Catholic Diocese of Peoria, Bishop Louis Tilka is bringing back an advisory board for the Archbishop Fulton Sheen Foundation. That board has been inactive since the bid for Sheen's sainthood was put on hold back in 2019. You can find more on these stories at WGLT.org. Last week on WGLT, you heard from two Illinois Supreme Court justices who visited McLean County and observed the county's family treatment court. In this continuation of our conversation with Elizabeth Rochford and Mary Kay O'Brien, the justices addressed things they've observed as two big pieces of legislation have aimed to transform the Illinois justice system. Rochford tells WGLT's Lauren Warnicki that anytime a new law goes into effect, litigation ensues. That was certainly the case in the implementation of cashless bail.
First of all, they were figuring it out at the trial court level, and then there were a great number of appeals that increased the appellate docket pretty significantly. But we, the Supreme Court, because we are the administrators of the entire court of Illinois, across Illinois, we addressed those issues head on. Right. And really have managed all of those cases with timelines that address them very efficiently. Obviously, you're talking about people who could potentially be incarcerated and whether they should or shouldn't be. So it's something we have taken very seriously.
To what extent are you sort of sensing this being a thing that can be self-reflective and malleable and changeable as it's implemented?
Well, we have no part in that, of course. We don't make public policy. That is the role of the General Assembly. And I'm sure that, the sheriff and the state's attorney are talking to their legislators, and so are members of the public. And, I was a former legislator, so there is no such thing as a one and done piece of legislation. They're going to continue to work on it and fine tune it and change things, and, that's the nature of the game.
I wanted to ask you about a more recent big change piece of legislation, the implementation of a statewide public defender's office in the state. It is a common trope that public defense is not as well resourced as prosecutions. How do you anticipate this legislation maybe changing that, easing that? And I just am curious about your personal perspectives on that tension between resource allocation and between defenders and prosecutors. Justice Rochford?
We would have an opinion about. Again, the law has changed. It's at the very early point in terms of implementation. It's going to take some time. It's at its beginning.
Yeah. I mean, I understand you can't assert an opinion, but have you observed that?
I think that there is just as much of a geographical or population density issue when it comes to not just the defenders, but also to the prosecutors. If you are an assistant state's attorney in Ford County, you are going to probably make a lot less money than an assistant state's attorney in DuPage County, and the same with the public defenders. We have to deal both with that aspect, that geographically things are different, and that in some counties, and including some in the 11th, that the overall number of attorneys is, aging and getting fewer. So where do you find the public defender? The Illinois Supreme Court is going to be, we're tasked with part of the implementation, is to provide the ability everywhere in the state to have access to a public defender if maybe there isn't one available in the county or something. So, of course, it is Justice Rochford said, it is very new legislation, but to the extent that we're tasked with some parts of it, I think, our look is to best implement the intent of the legislation and to work, through those issues of access to justice and having, the same resources for experts and for all of those things.
That was Illinois Supreme Court Justices Elizabeth Rochford and Mary Kay O'Brien speaking with WGLT's Lauren Warnicki. You can read or listen to more of their conversation at WGLT.org. And that's it for today. The show was produced by Lou Warner. You can subscribe to the Leadoff on the NPR app or wherever you get your podcasts.